Hello everyone and welcome to the latest Handyman in the Field. I'm Dustin and today we have a new topic. This one actually is a combination of naturally how some of the content that I've been doing has been going, but also kind of derived from a comment that was left on a recent video. This was from a couple of weeks ago. I had a video that was called Jobs I Price Differently Than I Used to. And we had a comment that came across from My Shy Guy that said, "Great video, thanks for sharing. It always amazes me how often customers assume a fix/repair is easy, yet can't answer basic questions that I may have." 100%. I even responded back to him and I said, "Too true, and it's almost always the same people. People who can answer the questions always know how difficult it is." So what we're specifically going to be talking about is jobs that sound easy, but they're usually not. On paper, as someone verbally describes them, they 100% sound like they're something that could be easy. But most of the time, there's a lot more to it. Now, that doesn't mean they can't be easy, but it does tend to go the direction of there's going to be a lot more to it than you think. When a customer calls and they describe something, they might be thinking it as, oh, well, this is just a quick fix, but it's rarely ever a quick stop. I've got a bunch of different examples, even stuff from this past week that I could use as an example. But when you get there, sometimes you realize, especially if it's something that you haven't done or there's a lot of diagnostic aspects to it, you realize that it's a lot more involved. So the reality is that the phone call versus reality is that customers only see the symptom. They have no idea what it actually takes to go to what's causing the problem, but they also don't understand that just because it sounds like a 30-minute job doesn't mean that it can't become something much bigger. So let's run down some of these. And again, some of these are going to overlap a little bit with some of the jobs that I price differently, and some of them it's more of a just be on the lookout for these. And I'm sure you've heard some of these, or you've come across some of these yourself if you're a handyman or if you do trades work. I'd love to hear what some of the other items that you guys have that you know are going to take a lot longer than a customer ever thinks. So the first one I've got is a door adjustment. Door adjustments can be easy, and sometimes they can be the exact opposite of easy. Funny enough, I had two different door situations this past week. One of the doors, it was sagging a little bit from the top to the side, and it also needed new weatherproofing. And there was an issue where even when we were able to get the door to go back a little bit, it created a gap between the frame and the door. So again, there's minor things that as you have more experience, you're going to realize that there are some fixes that you can do, or there are some tricks and tips and things that you learn along the way. But customers don't know that, and even when you use every trick or tip that you have in your book, it might not always work. So then you're still struggling to try to figure out a solution. Obviously they're going to think of it as the door just won't close properly. It's most of the time, it's not that it's not closing at all necessarily, it's that it's not closing properly. It could be the hinges, it could be the weather stripping, it could be the frame has adjusted, because of settlement with the house. It could be a latch alignment. It could be, seasonal, again, from the settlement, a seasonal movement that's happening. I've had situations where I've had interior doors where in one season they latch perfectly, and then the next season I get a call back 6 months later and they're saying that it's not latching anymore. It's not because what I didn't work. It's because it's a different time of the year. Where I live, things freeze. Because things freeze, things shift. So you just have to be aware that stuff happens. But that's another thing to keep in mind, is that you might have to go back to take care of something that you've already taken care of. So again, it can be more involved than the customer thinks, and it could be definitely more involved than obviously the way it sounds. It's it's very rarely just one adjustment. It could be a combination of the hinges. It could be a combination of the latch needing an adjustment. It could be a combination of the weather stripping. If they're talking about a gap between the frame and the door, it could be weather stripping. It could be a frame adjustment. There's a bunch of different things. So just keep those in mind. Leak diagnostics, I don't do a ton of these. Now, if there's an issue where someone shows me a ceiling and they say, hey, there's a spot here, chances are if it's not a main floor and there's a bathroom up above, chances are that it's something else related to the roof. Funny story, again, this just happened this past week. I had a customer contact me, take some pictures of their ceiling and going across, and they said these water spots appeared out of nowhere recently. I'm not exactly sure what's causing it. I knew from the house that the customer had, because I've been there, that it's a split level, but the rooms that she was taking pictures in, there was nothing above it. I sent her just a quick message back and said, honestly, the first step would be to look in the attic and see if there's any issues, water spots on the plywood part of the roof, to see if there's any issues there. As it turns out, she figured out what it was. She recently had her house painted, and for whatever reason, the painter that she hired had the idea to take 2x4s and nail them directly into the roof so that he could stand and not fall. Well, then when he pulled the 2x4s up with the nails, guess what? He left the holes, and now she's got a problem with her roof, and she's got problems with the drywall inside, probably some situations with the insulation in the attic as well. And it's a real tight spot to get it into because it's a split level, so there's not really an attic space in that specific spot. So not a great scenario, but again, you don't know how that's going to turn out. Finding a leak is often much harder than you think. You might see something in one spot and it might be completely in a different spot from where it's coming from. Water doesn't always appear exactly where it enters. It could travel down something. If it's hitting something and the thing it's hitting is not exactly level, it's going to travel away from it. I've had situations where water hits a beam and it travels down the beam because the beam is just a 1/16 of an inch not level, and the water ends up in a completely different area than the beam. Leak diagnostics are something that obviously require a lot of patience and a lot of investigation. Customers are asking for that specifically because they don't have any idea where to even start most of the time. So that's something to keep in mind. Drywall repairs. I brought this up when I talked about the jobs that I priced differently. Drywall repairs, let's say you got a fist-sized hole in the wall. It looks like, it's just a patch in the wall. But if there's texture involved, that's going to be a completely different scenario. You're going to potentially have to have multiple visits. You have no idea when when you schedule it, there's going to be high humidity or not, where it's going to take longer drying time, longer amounts of time to dry. But then ultimately you have to blend it into the walls so that it's not extremely noticeable. All of that said, there are times where drywall repairs can be relatively easy. If you run into a perfect scenario where there's not a lot of high humidity, the drying time works perfectly because of that. It's not a horrible, hole where it's like super big where you have to do a lot of feathering because it's just such a big spot. But you don't know what you're getting into until most of the time when you see that. Shower valve repairs. I had a situation recently, well, it wasn't recent, it was a couple months back. There was a customer who contacted me about a leaky faucet in their shower. At first glance, from the pictures that I had taken, it looked like it was one specific valve. I showed up with those valves and found out very quickly it was not that valve. Took additional pictures, tried to figure it out, but there was also some other issues that happened with that. When you have to turn off the water to a shower, you have to typically turn off water to the house. So you need to be able to access the water shutoff, or you have to have a curb key in order to turn off the water from the street. Keep in mind that if you damage the valve from the street, that's on you, and that's way more expensive than an issue with the valve on the inside of the house. I don't ever really want to work with the curb valve unless I absolutely have to. And most of the time I've told customers that I won't mess with the curb valve, especially because I know in my area, everyone has a valve within a certain range of the house, the age of the house. So like, you don't want to be having an issue. Seized cartridges can be a problem. The majority of cartridges I see are Moan, but that's not to say that there aren't occasionally a Delta or a Kohler out there. I've got a job on my books right now that's a Kohler cartridge. The one that I was just talking about was a Pfister cartridge that was like almost 40 years old. Luckily, I have a place, it's not close, but there's a place that I can get valves. There's a place that produces valves and they still sell them. It's unique and you have to go to that place. So again, that's going to require an extra trip if you can't get it at, obviously a big box store. But sometimes you could have issues where other things are discontinued and you don't want to run into that. But then the other side of it is that there could be other problems. The valve itself, I don't replace valves. Valves are not something that I mess with. So because of that, they're inside the wall that requires a plumber. So if you have an issue where there's an actual issue with the valve and it's not just the cartridge inside of it, that's not something I can take care of. I've had issues where the cartridge gets replaced and there's still a problem with the valve. It's just because of, sometimes it could be buildup of hard water over like decades of time. So you have to keep in mind of those. Caulking jobs. You never know what type of caulk is on is the existing caulk. It could be something that's going to come up easily. It could be something that someone misused the wrong thing and used silicone glue. And that's going to be an absolute pain to get out. I've had things where I show up thinking it's going to be, a bathtub situation and they used adhesive. And whoever it was did it and it was an adhesive and it is not coming up. Again, you are at the mercy of doing estimates, over phone or over, text message or photos and stuff like that. You're at the mercy of trying to figure out the best solution when it comes to certain things. So because of that, you have to be careful because you have to be able to make sure that you know how difficult this is, but also just make sure that the homeowner understands why you're pricing it the way you are. Cleaning surfaces, there could be issues. I've had this issue before where you show up to a place, you scrape the existing caulking, but because of how the caulking was installed, water got in between, let's say, the glass shower door and, or not the glass shower door, the glass enclosure for a walk-in shower and the caulking. Well, you scrape and scrape and scrape, and it turns out there's some mildew that is behind, potentially underneath the glass enclosure wall. That piece is not something that I'm going to typically take out, but of course, if I put clear caulk down, it's going to show that. You're not going to use white caulk on glass, but that's a situation you have to know ahead of time. Fence repairs, 100%, is something that you need to make sure that you account for. I have in the past made drastic mistakes about how I underestimated how much work there was going to be involved. Sometimes it can be smooth, and sometimes it can be the exact opposite of smooth. You might end up being there for 3 days instead of 1 because of how long it takes. And if you have a packed schedule, it's hard to get back over there to take care of something. It's also a problem because if the customer has a dog or pets in general that use the outdoors area, you can't not have the fence not have, some way of keeping the animals in if necessary. So that's the biggest thing. The biggest lesson is never assume a job is simple. Experience teaches you where problems usually hide, but you don't gain that right away. You have to gain that over time. It just takes a lot of time and a lot of experience. When you don't plan for the fact that these things could go sideways, you are creating an issue where you're going to end up having disappointment for either the customer that you're working at or the next customer that you're supposed to be going to at a certain time. So you need to make sure you leave room for the unexpected. Most customers aren't trying to underestimate the job. They just don't understand everything that's involved. Part of our job is explaining to them what we find. I get complimented a lot when it comes from customers about how they knew exactly what was happening. They knew exactly what needed to be done. They knew exactly what I was doing, how I was doing it. And then if something unexpected comes up that I can't take care of, I explain it to them and explain why. You also then need to make sure you're leaving a specific amount within your estimates that you can take off some if necessary. I just had a situation today where a customer, I was supposed to install a vanity, a sink, a bidet, one of those external bidets on a toilet, on an existing toilet, replace some baseboards and a light fixture. Very straightforward. All of it should have been straightforward. Everything went pretty smoothly up until we hooked up the drain. The new vanity and sink were slightly taller and it was about a ½ inch further out. Well, the problem is that the pop-up drain that we installed for the new sink, it has a rubber gasket. If that rubber gasket doesn't sit completely flush, level, flush with the bottom of the sink, what happens is if you just happen to put too much pressure on it, you're going to get a leak right there. Long story short, the wall tube that was coming out of the wall was going directly into a cast iron pipe, and it was fastened in some way with some sort of glue, or either that or the metal nut that was on there to hold the tube in was just rusted beyond belief, but it wouldn't come off. I tried everything to get it off. I can't mess with cast iron, the actual cast iron aspect of it, because that's the pipe technically inside the wall. I'm not allowed to touch that based off of the licensing requirements in my state. So I tried to make it work. I tried to, get some sort of little momentum. There was no give whatsoever on that wall tube to get the extra ½ inch that I needed. So ultimately it came down to, I tried again. I attempted to use a different pop-up drain. None of it worked. And ultimately we got down to a scenario where I basically said, hey, I'm going to take some money off of the total that I'm going to give you because you're going to have to call a plumber to come out. Now, is what happened my fault? No, my estimate did make sure that I was covered for things like that. But at the same time, I didn't complete the job completely, and I did have some wiggle room on my estimate where I could take money off so that she could use that towards the plumber that's going to have to come out to take, a service trip cost for the plumber. Now, the plumber is also going to do something that needs to be done regardless, but that customer is happy with me despite it not being complete. I explained it completely, gave her exactly what she needs to tell the plumber. Everything is taken care of. Happy customer, and that customer is a repeat customer. She'll come back and for other things that she has come up. But that's the thing. You have to be prepared for those unexpected moments. So just keep that in mind. Ultimately, some of the jobs that sound the easiest are the ones that require the most experience. You're not going to gain the experience without just having a ton of time pass and having a bunch of the same types of jobs. One of the reasons why a lot of people niche down on work that they're doing is because it is easier to always know what the solutions are for all these things that are unexpected. When you have a variety of services, we're talking, you've got 50 something services that you can offer. Always knowing what the solution is not possible. There's plenty of times where I have to take a moment and sit back and try to understand what the best solution is. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't want to necessarily be sitting on my phone in front of a customer for 30 minutes while I try to figure out what the issue is, but sometimes I just have to excuse myself from the situation, get to the truck, and try to figure out what the best solution is. Those are just things you have to come up with, but those are things that you have to understand when it comes to the unexpectedness of what we do. So with all of that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section. If you have ideas or if you have jobs that you're thinking of, like, oh, I wish you would have mentioned that, please leave them in the comments. I love hearing those. These are just ones that I constantly come up with. I try to stay away from fence repair, especially in the summer. I'm trying to get away from it completely because I've had too many situations come up where something is too unexpected, or you just can't go in the exact same spot, and that presents a problem. So I'd love to hear what you guys, what jobs you guys have had that, it falls out the same way. Customer thinks that it's going to be something super simple or super easy, and it turns out that it's not easy at all. And things went completely sideways, and then the customer was kind of wondering why it took you so long, because, sometimes they have expectations that we just can't deliver on. So with all that being said, if you guys are not subscribed, please subscribe. We have new videos coming out every Wednesday and Thursday. That said, this coming up Wednesday, I don't know why I said Wednesday. We have new videos coming out every Monday and Thursday. The Monday videos are called This Week in the Field. It's a weekly series where I dive into all of the inner workings of my business, when I talk about what happens behind the scenes, the amount of money that I charge, the money that comes in, all the different things that just go into running my business. That's also available in a podcast form on YouTube Music as well. If you want to listen to it, if you're not keen on watching my pretty face, you can certainly listen to that. These videos that I release on Thursday are different topics related to running a business, and hopefully they are helpful for you guys. And if you find them helpful, like I said, drop a comment letting me know that they're helpful, and also share them with other people. With all that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. You've been watching The Handyman in the Field. I've been Dustin. Thank you guys. We'll see you guys next time.